What asset class are we talking about here, Ethan? Is this mostly multifamily or do you have a sweet spot?
No, I will do this on almost anything. Most of the people I know are in multifamily. That's just where my network is. But I've looked at like crypto stuff. I've looked at all kinds of things. So as long as something meets this fact pattern where somebody has failed to raise enough money, primarily because an investor backs out on them last minute, but they have the ability of raising the money after closing to pay me back, and they have other assets that are valuable that could be pledged as collateral, even if we're being creative with collateral. Like it's a boat, it's a plane.
I was going to ask you, that was going to be my next question. What are you using to collateralize? You're leaning the property, right?
Not necessarily. Sometimes a second lien is not permitted, especially behind agency loans. So then we have to take pledges of membership interest. We have to get creative with collateral. We have to end up taking so much collateral, like on a 1.5 million loan, we might have to take collateral worth 8 million because it might be hard to sell. One might be a car. One might be like an art in storage. One might be, I don't know, crypto, or one might be a brokerage account that they can't liquidate or margin loan against, right? It could be a variety of different things. I've looked at almost anything. What I'm looking for is it valuable? And then how much of a pain in the ass is it for me to try to sell it or take it?
Got it. Okay. So you are known for these bridge loans. Do you have a sweet spot on these?
The largest one I've done on this is 6 million. Smallest one I've done is 75K.
And what terms are you looking for now? Is it still 3 months?
Generally, if you can't show me a path of paying me back within 4 months, I'm already not interested. So if your expectation is you're going to pay me back in 4 months and 1 day, I'm already going to turn it down. I'm really looking for 4 months or less.
Are you vetting the deal? Are you vetting the sponsor? Are you vetting the GP? Are you vetting all of the above, the LPs? What are you looking at as far as risk mitigation from the borrower?
So I'm vetting the sponsor. So I'm looking at how much money have they raised in the past? How experienced are they? What is their reputation in the marketplace? Do I know anybody that's partnered with them or has done business with them in the past? And then how good are they at raising money post-closing to pay me back? Those are by far the most important things about the sponsor. And then the second most important thing is the collateral. How much of their stuff are they pledging to me? What is it worth? How likely is it that they'd be willing to give it up if I had to take it? Right? Because some people, if you push them enough, or if they get to a spot, people can become extremely creative. They could go to their brother-in-law that they hate and borrow 100K. They could go to their sister and they hate her, and they can get her to loan them 50K. They can go to their mom. They can go to their college roommate. But they have to be in a situation where they feel like it's worth it, right, for them to pull that card. And if, they got a Michael Jordan baseball card that they're not willing to sell and they're not willing to give to me and it's worth a lot, they don't want to lose it, then maybe they will go call their mom that they haven't talked to for 10 years to get some money from mom.
Got it. Okay. So that's how you are essentially mitigating the risk and what kind of deals you're looking at and for the length of time for the term. So it's the sponsor, it's the collateral, it's relationship networking, seeing if you know anyone who knows them, how long they've been in the game, how many deals they've done. And then you're looking at the deal as well, obviously. And then you're looking how you can collateralize the deal and what the collateral is.
Correct. And for the deal, we're just making sure it looks like a normal deal, right? So if they say, hey, 17% IRR, and then we open up the financial model and we're like, this is done completely wrong, or your assumptions are wildly stupid, then we're going to think, well, this person's probably not.
Do you have a state that you like more than others? Obviously, you're in Texas, Ethan. You probably know the market really well in Texas. Are there states that you like more than others?
Texas for sure, because we're more experienced in Texas. We have a bigger network in Texas, but we've done this across the country. So we're just making sure the deal actually pencils, because a lot of people, you open the financial model and it's wrong. You open up the financial model and it's wildly optimistic and it makes no sense. And sometimes we're like, wow, how did this even get past the lender? Like, they shouldn't even be lending 60% of this. This is like a wildly optimistic deal.
Another question I have for you, Ethan. Do you offer more support to your borrowers, like as far as some sort of mentorship or this or that, or newer people in the game? Or are you really looking for sophisticated, experienced investors that just need to get saved because they missed on something, or as you alluded to, someone pulled out and they don't want to lose their reputation?
It's really both. So I've seen the whole gamut. I've had a guy with $1 billion portfolio come to me multiple times for money. I've had a guy that's one of the largest property owners here in the Houston area come to me for loans. People get themselves into, so it's kind of like my example from 8th grade, right? So I started at 0, and then I watched people ahead of me make mistakes. So they get an 80, I get 100. They get a 95, I get 100. And then over time, I'm at 99 and they somehow ended up at 91. So life happens to people. Sometimes they're good people, sometimes they're bad people, sometimes they're medium people. But life happens and people don't have liquidity and things just happen to them. And sometimes it's appropriate to lend to them and sometimes it's not. It just depends on what's going on. So this has worked with new people. This has worked with experienced people. With new people, typically, they're not going to have a lot of collateral to grant. So usually you're going to want them to bring on additional capital raising partners to help them raise the capital post-closing to pay back.
And so then that's just a little bit expounding upon my question. Are you able to link these people up? Hey, I like this kid. Hey, he has a really good deal. There's juice in this deal. He needs some support. Are you able to essentially maybe place him with some other GPs that or another sponsor, maybe in another part of the country? Are you willing to facilitate a relationship like that? Or is it kind of on a case by case, whether, the mood strikes you?
It's case by case. But yeah, I mean, the whole point of networking is it's not just what people refer to you. You have to also give back. So it's also about, who can I refer back, right? So that's why I get on these discovery calls and I'm like, okay, somebody starts talking to me about like gold mining. And I'm like, I've literally no interest in this, right? But then they might refer me to somebody in real estate and it works out great. Or it might be somebody that's like doing something in Hawaii and I have no interest in Hawaii. And I say, hey, well, I know this guy who's in Hawaii. Like, why don't you talk to him?
Got it.
So it's all about just linking people up
100%.
and just facilitating conversation.
Give and take networking. Okay.
Yeah, just like how you referred me a guy in Houston, I would have probably never met him unless you referred me to him, even though he and I live in the same place.
He's awesome too. He's a great guy.
Yeah, he's great.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some other things. We're going to be running up on time here. Let's talk about universal life. So that's actually a really good segue. So our friend now in Houston, universal life. I know this is a completely different probably podcast because it's you can get into it there's a lot to it. So kind of explain to me in just a broad stroke what the universal life play is, putting the money in, how you get qualified for that, when it starts to compound, borrowing against it, like what are the pros and the cons, the benefits of it?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily. So there's term policies and then there's permanent policies. So term policy is what the financial gurus like Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey tell you to buy. They say, hey, buy a term policy, $100 a month. If you happen to die, your kids get $1 million, pay off the house, you'll be fine. And then save your money and invest the difference. 99% of people aren't able to save the money and invest the difference. They just end up wasting the money or spending it, right? And then there's what's called permanent life insurance, which some of these financial gurus hate because they find it to be a forced savings mechanism or they find it to be expensive, but they're viewing it only in terms of the dollar amount and not the value. So unfortunately, Susie Orman and Dave Ramsey aren't the best for the education on permanent life insurance policies. I mean, they have a role to play and they have a shtick to play and an audience to play to, so they can't really tell the...
Did you ever see that little bear cartoon talking about Susie Orman, A Life and Day of Financial Advisor?
No, I didn't. Was it funny?
Bro, it's from like maybe 5-6 years ago or something. It's hilarious, dude. I'm gonna send it to you after this. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yes.
No, look, their advice is probably good for the middle, 70% of Americans, but for some other people, it's really not appropriate and they're not really giving the full information. Like I myself have owned permanent life insurance policies for 11 years and they've performed great. I lived through our little mini COVID crash. My stock market accounts were down 50%. I was like, oh, I should buy. And I had no balls to buy, Jonathan. I didn't do shit. But if I sold in a panic, which I didn't do, I would have lost a ton of money. Guess what my life insurance policies did, Jonathan? They did nothing. They just kept going up steadily. They're like the little tortoise in the hare. It's not going to ever be the hare, but it's just the tortoise. And it just...
Would you agree, Ethan, that insurance companies, along with obviously like BlackRock and Vanguard and these powerhouses, are some of the strongest businesses in the world.
Absolutely. They're basically too big to fail.
Yeah. Okay. So then, like, I'm looking at insurance and I want to understand insurance, and I'm an investor. I have 20 properties or 5 or 50. I really want to get insurance because, if something happens to me, I want my family to be taken care of. I call Ethan, and then the conversation goes like what?
Yeah. So we'll study your personal financials, we'll study your liquidity, and then we'll see what you're interested in. For some reason, a lot of real estate investors only want to mess with real estate. So they don't do stocks, they don't do insurance, they don't do anything. They only do real estate, which I think it's not enough diversification. They come to me and say, well, my diversification is I have 20 different houses in San Diego. I'm like, that's great, but that's still not really diversification.
They're all on the same block.
Yeah,
they're all on the same street.
20 in a row, like this one hood. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, by the way, it's actually one property, actually.
Yeah, I'm like, that's not really diversification. Or they're like, oh, I own this business. I've been a pool cleaner business. I'm like, okay, you're not really diversified at all. So I actually recommend that even though I'm a real estate guy and a heavy concentration of my portfolio is in real estate, I have a pretty large public market stock portfolio as well as insurance policies as well.
Do you invest as an equity partner as well at this point in your career, Ethan, or no? Only a lender?
No, I only like the short-term loans. And the reason I don't invest as a limited partner is because I can do better with the money on a short-term basis. And, I'm more of a transactional volume player. I'm not quite ready in my career right now to just park several $1 million and wait 5 years and get the returns back. I'm still in the more active.
Got it. Now, what about universal life insurance? Do you sell those policies as well?
We do. It's rare that we would necessarily recommend them a lot. So most people don't do universal life anymore. They do an indexed universal life. So what that is you get to pick a index. So most people will pick the S&P 500. So let's just get some real examples. So in 2022, the S&P 500 was down about 18.6%. So if you had $1 million January 1, 2022, and you didn't do anything, that would have been worth mark to market around $820K. You would have lost 18% if you didn't do anything. The following year, 2023, the S&P 500 was up about 26%. And again, if you didn't do anything, you're 820, now you're back way above $1 million, right? Instead of owning it in your brokerage account, you actually owned it via your index universal life policy. In 2022, when you could have lost 18.6%, they will just give you a 0. So your account is still worth $1 million. They're just like, okay, we give you a floor. So if the S&P goes down, we're just going to give you 0. And then the following year, when it's up 26%, they say, hey, man, we can't give you the full 26%, right? Like that's too rich. We'll give you 12. So what you're doing is you're reducing the volatility on the downside. So you're going to lose.
That's exactly my model in real estate, Ethan. So
you don't want to lose.
Buying property that is under the market value that needs to be rehabbed, keeping it there so I can always attach debt to it. In worst case scenario, there's an asset there in San Diego. Then I do the development, which is the building, and do everything in house, and then we build new construction. So we're taking something, we're obviously forcing appreciation and making it better, getting a tenant in there, I talked to you about this, to cover our nut, and then I'm developing new real estate behind it. But worst case scenario, no matter what, I'm not tearing anything down and I'm not developing just plain dirt. There's always going to be, not always, often there's going to be an asset that remains there to mitigate against the downside and then maximize for, in our case, on the upside. So it's conceptually the same thing. And when Universal Life was explained to me, and I did buy a Universal Life policy 4 years ago, that I like that, right? Because you're mitigating on the downside, and then you don't get to hit the home run, but it's asymmetrical, right? In theory.
Correct. It is. Unfortunately, though, there's studies that run both ways. You know how they say there's lies, damn lies, in statistics? I read a lot of the studies. It's not super clear if owning it that way actually outperforms the stock market, right? Because the stock market in general in this country has gone up 2/3 or more of the time, but sometimes it has cataclysm failures of like 50% down, or like COVID, right? COVID year, depending on when you owned it and if you were a forced seller or if you just sold out of fear, That year was actually up, but you would have lived through a 50% downturn during those specific months.
Yeah, I bet those margin calls on those phones I bet that was nuts, man. Crazy.
Yeah, so if you were a forced seller because you got margin called for no good rent and you wanted to stay, you were just forced to sell at a low. And then if you could have just waited 3 months, you'd be like at all-time highs again, right? So much of it is dependent on timing. And even like, for example, if you bought a policy on January 2, I bought a policy on January 3, and like January 2 to January 3, like, I don't know, like North Korea invades South Korea and the stock market's down 10%, you and I are going to get different returns just because of the specific day we bought.